The aliens arrived on Earth with a sense of superiority that was palpable. Their ships hovered silently in the atmosphere, gleaming like mirrors under the sun. As they descended, they observed human civilization from a distance, their advanced sensors scanning everything: cities, forests, oceans, and, most curiously to them, humans themselves. To these aliens, who had conquered countless planets and cultures across the galaxy, Earth was a curious oddity. A planet teeming with primitive creatures, including the humans who, despite their technological advancements, seemed so strange. Their assessment of humanity was swift and condescending. They found humans amusing, fragile, and, frankly, weak. The aliens' culture placed strength, survival, and conquest above all else. To them, the idea of keeping pets, especially pets that were, by their standards, completely useless, was baffling. Dogs, cats, rabbits, hamsters. These were creatures that had no purpose other than to amuse their human masters, who doted on them like children. The aliens couldn't understand it. These animals were cute, but that was the extent of their value. The notion that humans found comfort in their company, their dependence on these animals for emotional support, seemed utterly ridiculous. The aliens were warriors, conquerors, and survivors. Their pets were war beasts, engineered for battle. To them, domesticated animals were nothing more than symbols of human weakness. "Look at them," one of the aliens scoffed, observing a human family walking through a park with a dog on a leash. "They keep creatures that are so fragile. It's almost laughable." Another alien, a high-ranking commander with a reputation for being particularly disdainful of other species, chuckled. "Weak, sentimental fools. They can barely defend themselves, yet they surround themselves with these. What do they call them? Pets? It's almost as if they are incapable of surviving without them. How can such a species pose any threat to us?" The other aliens agreed, their laughter echoing through their communication channels. They watched humans care for these creatures with tenderness, providing them with food, shelter, and endless affection. The sight left them unimpressed and deeply amused. The idea that a species who could barely survive without emotional crutches like animals could stand against the might of the galaxy seemed absurd. But the aliens did not fully comprehend the human spirit. They did not understand the depths of human strength, nor did they grasp the incredible bond that humans shared with their animals. In the midst of this, one human stood out. The protagonist, a former soldier, was not impressed by the aliens' mockery. He had heard their cruel remarks, their dismissive tone toward humanity's love for its animals, and it made his blood boil. But instead of reacting with anger, he decided to do something more effective. He would prove the aliens wrong. He would show them just how wrong they were about humans, and more specifically, how wrong they were about the animals that humans cherished. He had a plan, one that would not only silence their mockery but shift their perspective entirely. For the protagonist, the solution was simple. He would return to the wilds of Earth and bring back something the aliens would never expect. A cougar. Not just any cougar, but a wild, powerful, and dangerous creature. One that embodied the strength, survival instinct, and resilience that the aliens mistakenly believed humans lacked. The protagonist had encountered these creatures before, had seen firsthand how they moved through the wild with grace and power. He knew that these animals, though beautiful and majestic, were capable of incredible violence. He also knew that humans had been living alongside such creatures for centuries, hunting them, studying them, and in some cases even taming them. The bond between humanity and the cougar was not one of weakness. It was one of respect, understanding, and survival. As he set out on his journey, he reflected on what the aliens had said. Their arrogance, their belief that strength was synonymous with cold, unfeeling conquest, made him want to prove them wrong even more. Humans had always been adaptable, resourceful, and resilient. They had thrived on Earth for millennia, not by dominating everything around them, but by learning to coexist with it. The protagonist believed that this was a far greater strength than the alien philosophy of conquest. His journey wasn't just about finding the cougars. It was about showing the aliens that humanity's true strength lay in its connection to the world around it, not in its ability to conquer it. He knew that the moment he returned with the cougar, alive and in full display of its power, the aliens would have no choice but to reconsider their opinion of humanity. He didn't need to prove that humans were stronger or more technologically advanced than the aliens. What he needed to show them was that humanity's true power came from its deep-rooted connection to the natural world, even to the most dangerous creatures on the planet. The protagonist's resolve hardened as he ventured further into the wilderness. The journey would be difficult, dangerous even, but that was the point. He wasn't bringing back a docile creature. He was bringing back an apex predator, one capable of surviving in the harshest environments. And in the eyes of the aliens, it would be a reminder that the creatures humans loved were not weak. They were symbols of strength, unity, and survival. What the aliens failed to understand was that humanity's ability to bond with such creatures was the true measure of its power. When the protagonist finally encountered the Cougars in the wild, he was ready. He didn't approach them as a conqueror but as someone who understood their nature. The Cougars sensed his presence, and for a moment, there was a tense standoff. The powerful creatures, sleek and deadly, locked eyes with the human. But the protagonist didn't flinch. He knew that, like humans, the Cougars had their own code, their own way of navigating the world. He respected that, and he knew that if he moved carefully, with respect and understanding, he could gain their trust. It wasn't long before he had succeeded. With a mixture of skill, patience, and sheer determination, he had managed to calm one of the Cougars and begin forming a bond. The moment was both humbling and empowering. He realized that the Cougars, despite their terrifying power, were not unapproachable. They were simply creatures that demanded respect. The protagonist had given that respect, and in return, he had earned a measure of trust. As he prepared to return to the aliens with his newfound companions, he knew that the confrontation would be inevitable. But this time it would be on his terms. He had something to show them, something that would forever change the way they viewed humanity. The aliens may have mocked the idea of humans keeping cute animals, but now, the protagonist would show them just how dangerous, powerful, and resilient the creatures humans held dear could be. And in doing so, he would remind the universe that humanity's strength was not to be underestimated. The protagonist knew that the only way to change the aliens' perception was to return with something far more impressive than what they considered pets. He wasn't about to show them some cuddly dog or an adorable kitten. He was going to bring back a creature that represented strength, power, and raw survival instinct. But the journey wasn't going to be easy. The Cougars were not domesticated animals. They were apex predators, wild, untamed, and dangerous. As the protagonist ventured deeper into the wilderness, he reflected on what the aliens had said. Their ridicule had stung, but more than that, it had made him realize something important. The aliens had no understanding of what it meant to live in harmony with nature. They viewed strength as something purely physical or technological. To them, survival was about the ability to conquer, to dominate. What they failed to grasp was that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their ability to crush everything in their path, but in their capacity to live alongside powerful creatures, respecting them as equals. The protagonist's decision wasn't just about proving the aliens wrong. It was about showing them the strength in restraint, in understanding, in the bond between human and animal. Humans didn't need to dominate the earth to prove their worth. They could coexist with its most dangerous creatures, even tame them when necessary, and still survive. This was the strength he would show them. He wasn't about to walk into the wilderness without preparation. The Cougars, like any wild animal, would not be easily tamed or controlled. He had to be ready, both mentally and physically, to deal with their power. The protagonist knew that a cougar wasn't just a creature of raw strength. It was intelligent, calculating, and fiercely independent. Approaching it would require more than brute force. It would require patience, skill, and respect. He made sure he was properly equipped. He needed to be ready for anything. A simple tranquilizer dart wouldn't be enough. The cougar's instincts would be too sharp, its reflexes too quick. He knew he'd have to spend days, even weeks, gaining the animal's trust. If he rushed things, the cougar would sense his impatience, and that could result in disaster. It wasn't just about getting the animal back to the aliens. It was about showing the aliens that humans had the ability to bond with creatures that would otherwise tear them apart. Each day, the protagonist ventured further into the wilderness, searching for signs of cougar activity. He didn't rely on technology to track them. Instead, he used his instincts honed over years of training and survival. He followed the signs: paw prints, broken branches, the subtle scent carried by the wind. The hunt was slow, methodical, but he knew it was the only way to succeed. He couldn't rush it. There was no shortcut. The protagonist eventually found a cougar's den, nestled in the rocky outcroppings of a secluded canyon. The air was thick with the scent of the animal. He waited patiently, observing the surroundings, trying to anticipate the cougar's movements. He knew the risks of approaching such a powerful predator, but he was determined. He would not fail. For days, he observed the cougar, learning its patterns, its behavior. He didn't move in too close, not yet. He knew that trust would take time, and that was something the aliens couldn't understand. They believed that power was about imposing one's will on others, forcing submission. But the protagonist understood that true power came from mutual respect and understanding. The cougar didn't need to be dominated. It simply needed to be approached with the right mindset. Finally, after nearly a week of careful observation, the cougar made an unexpected move. It approached him cautiously, its muscles rippling under its sleek coat. The protagonist held his ground, not showing fear, but not making any sudden movements. He let the cougar come to him, and it did. Slowly, it circled him, its sharp eyes never leaving his face. He held his breath. This was the moment of truth. The cougar paused before him, then made a low, rumbling growl, a sign of its uncertainty. The protagonist remained still, his gaze unwavering. It wasn't about dominance. It was about showing the animal that he wasn't a threat, that he was part of the natural order. Finally, the cougar stopped growling and sat down, its posture relaxed. The tension broke. That moment of connection, that silent agreement between predator and human, was powerful. The protagonist could feel the energy of the wild animal, its raw strength, its untamed spirit. He knew that the cougar, despite its fierce nature, was capable of trust. He also knew that this was a dangerous game. One wrong move and the cougar could easily turn on him. But he had earned its respect, and that was the first step. Over the next few days, the protagonist continued to build on that initial bond. He moved carefully, maintaining the distance that allowed the cougar to trust him while never giving up control of the situation. He used food to coax the cougar closer, establishing a routine that the animal began to recognize. Slowly, the cougar grew accustomed to his presence. It started to approach him more freely, even allowing him to touch its fur briefly, though it still retained its wariness. The protagonist didn't push for more than the animal was willing to give. As he spent more time with the cougar, the protagonist realized something important. This wasn't about dominating the animal. It wasn't about subjugation. It was about understanding the animal's nature and respecting it. The cougar had power, and it could easily kill him if it chose to. But that wasn't the point. The point was that the cougar, like humans, had to choose to engage. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, not fear or submission. After weeks of patient work, the protagonist finally had the cougar where he wanted it. He was ready to return to the aliens. But he wasn't just bringing back an apex predator. He was bringing back the symbol of human strength. The strength to live in harmony with nature, to respect its most dangerous creatures, and to tame them, not through force, but through patience, understanding, and a shared bond. The aliens might have laughed at the idea of humans keeping pets, but they wouldn't be laughing when they saw what the protagonist had brought back. The cougar would speak for itself. The protagonist returned, not with a dog or a cat, but with a cougar, alive, powerful, and standing beside him, a testament to humanity's ability to coexist with some of Earth's most dangerous creatures. The aliens, who had once scoffed at humans for keeping cute animals, were about to witness something that would change their perception forever. When the aliens first saw the cougar, they were stunned into silence. The powerful creature, sleek and imposing, moved with a predatory grace that left the aliens momentarily speechless. They had never seen anything like it up close. Their culture had taught them to value strength, but they understood that strength came from the ability to dominate and conquer. To them, the cougar was nothing more than an animal to be eradicated or controlled, a force of nature that could be tamed only through sheer power. But the protagonist wasn't there to dominate the cougar. He was there to show the aliens that humanity's strength came from a different place, one rooted in understanding and respect, not subjugation. The cougar stood proudly beside the protagonist, its yellow eyes fixed on the aliens. The air between them was charged with tension. The aliens, who had once dismissed humanity as weak, now found themselves unsure of what to make of the situation. The cougar, with its raw strength and wild nature, was far from the cute, docile animals they had mocked. This was an apex predator, one capable of tearing through anything in its path. And yet, the protagonist stood next to it with confidence, unafraid. The silence stretched on as the protagonist let the cougar do the talking. There was no need for him to explain anything. The aliens could see the strength in the creature's stance, the power in its movements. This was not the behavior of a weak species. It was the behavior of a species that had learned to live alongside its greatest predators, to survive and thrive in a world full of dangers. The aliens, who had initially believed that humans' relationship with animals was a sign of weakness, now found themselves questioning their assumptions. They had always thought of themselves as the epitome of strength, with their advanced technology and ability to conquer planets. But here, in front of them, stood a human who had not only survived in the wild alongside a powerful predator, but had also gained its trust. The cougar was no longer just an animal. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience, of its ability to respect and coexist with nature's fiercest creatures. One of the aliens spoke, his voice tentative, as if unsure of what he was seeing. How did you do this?" he asked, looking from the cougar to the protagonist. "How did you tame it?" The protagonist didn't immediately respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he simply gestured to the cougar, allowing the animal to step forward, its muscles rippling beneath its sleek coat. "It wasn't about taming it," the protagonist said, his voice calm and steady. "It was about understanding it. This creature is powerful, could tear me apart if it wanted to, but it doesn't, because I respect it. And that's something humans have always done. We don't dominate nature. We live with it. We adapt, we learn, and we survive. This cougar isn't just an animal. It's a partner, an equal in the struggle for survival." The aliens exchanged uncertain glances. They had never considered this idea. To them, survival meant conquering everything around you, eliminating threats, and proving your dominance. The idea that humans could coexist with something as dangerous as a cougar was completely foreign to them. But the cougar, standing calmly by the protagonist's side, was undeniable. It wasn't cowering. It wasn't submissive. It was at ease, a creature of raw power that had chosen not to attack, not because it was afraid, but because it had made a choice to respect the human who had earned its trust. Another alien, one who had been particularly vocal in mocking humanity, finally spoke up, his voice tinged with awe. "You've made it your ally." The protagonist nodded. "Not an ally in the way you think," he replied. "It's not about control. It's about respect. We've learned to live alongside creatures like this, not by conquering them, but by understanding them. That's something your species doesn't seem to grasp. You believe that power comes from domination, but real strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to coexist." The words hung in the air. The aliens, who had initially believed themselves to be the superior species, were now faced with a challenge to their worldview. They had underestimated humanity, thinking that its bond with animals was nothing more than a weakness, an emotional crutch. But the cougar standing before them was a living testament to humanity's resilience and ingenuity. The protagonist had not only survived the wild but had done so with the cooperation of one of its most dangerous creatures. The aliens fell silent again, this time with a sense of uncertainty that they had never felt before. They had come to Earth expecting to find a weak species, one they could easily dismiss. Instead, they were confronted with something entirely different. A species that had mastered the art of survival, not through brute strength, but through adaptability, respect, and intelligence. The protagonist allowed the silence to linger for a moment longer before speaking again. You mocked us for our pets, for the animals we keep. But the truth is, our bond with animals goes deeper than you realize. We don't keep them for companionship alone. We learn from them, we adapt, and that's why we've survived. It's not because we're stronger than you. It's because we know how to survive, even in the most hostile environments. The aliens were starting to understand. They had come to Earth believing that strength was measured by the ability to dominate. But now they saw that there was another way to measure strength, a way that went beyond technology or physical power. The cougar, standing proudly beside the protagonist, was proof of that strength. And as the aliens looked at it, they began to realize that humanity, far from being weak, was a force to be reckoned with in its own right. The protagonist had proven his point. The aliens might have laughed at humanity's love for animals, but now they understood that this bond was a source of strength, not weakness. And as they left Earth, they did so with a new respect for the human species, one that would not easily be forgotten. The cougar, in its silent power, had spoken for humanity, showing the aliens that sometimes strength doesn't come from domination. It comes from coexistence.